Do you remember as a kid when they let you have birthday parties and you go to invite your friends, your closest friends, and then your mom would say something like this: "Aren't you going to invite Andy?" Andy's kind of weird. Andy invited you to his birthday, Donald. Oh, but you're thinking, that was 3 months ago. That was a long time ago for a 5 or 8 or 13-year-old. I don't know. And then she'd talk to you. You need to invite Andy. It's only been in my last few years that I realized I must certainly have been the add-on to someone else. As sure as I'm standing here, there must have been a birthday party planning meeting that went like this: "Aren't you going to invite Donald Shrumm?" And the kid would have said, "Oh, he's kind of strange. He's socially awkward. I don't know." And the mom, usually the mom, right? "You need to invite Donald." Wow. Today, to all of you, you're latecomers. You're someone else's add-on, +1, getting invited. We ought to act accordingly. I want to talk about law and grace. We often have this: if you believe, then you will be saved. If you become a Christian, then your life will go better and you'll have more meaning and joy. If you come to worship regularly, then you'll have this. In terms of salvation and healing, Paul says, wow, bravo, you've got that exactly, perfectly wrong. You've got it 180 degrees, and if you were any more wrong, you'd be starting to get right again. That the reality is, while we were yet sinners, right, Christ come to save us. Well, the reality is, you're broken, and you need God, and there ain't nothing you can do to help yourself. That's why God intervenes. That's why we believe. By the way, universalists and closet universalists, we're going to have a good morning. That God saves regardless of what you do. That's the whole point of grace. We tend to turn belief into a good work. I'll do this thing. Paul reserves his greatest judgments for those who do that. Today, the reversal of law and grace. Paul says it's that unconditional love, grace that transforms lives, that enables us to become a new creation. And then Paul wants to talk about law again, and it's not law and then that you have to, it's grace and then law, not law and grace. It's unconditional positive regard, healing, new Adam, new Eve, and now maybe I can serve others and do things for God. Yes, law is really important. The law shows us we can't be perfect, and so we need grace because we can't get there. This is the double entendre of the sermon title. It's the purpose, the end, and it's the end of purity law. We have no use for them except that they fulfill their function, their end, in pointing to our desperate need for grace. You'll never be enough. You can never do enough. You'll never be good enough. I hate to harp on this too much, but it's Paul's central core, and we get it wrong often. It's our first theologian's central point, and we reverse it somehow. He calls it the scandal of the cross. We don't even like it. We're offended by grace. We want to do our own thing. We want to be proud of what we have accomplished, what we have done. That's the problem, Paul says. It's not about you. And sometimes today, we on the liberal end kind of let theology be what it is. It feels maybe outdated, not quite relevant, and maybe not in accordance with our political convictions. And today I'm wondering if sometimes we make our own political stance a law, a purity code of our own. This morning, grace. This side of Easter, although if you're Orthodox, happy Easter. It's today. Their calendar's a little different. This side of Easter, we get some of our earliest church history. This morning, a history that completely shaped us. And by the way, for the next 2 weeks at 11:15, Resurrection Bible Study. A fun deep dive into a handful of texts at 11:15 in the other building. I hope you plan on joining us. It's 5 texts that will shock and delight you depending on your mood. It'll challenge you and give you permission to ask, if it's the central doctrine of our faith, how come I don't know this? How come we haven't looked at the biblical underpinnings? Really good stuff. I hold it in Bible study so that it doesn't leak into sermons. I hold it in Bible study to try to interrupt my own proclivity for being too nerdy and egg-headedly from this pulpit. The more Bible study we have, the smoother sermons go. You ought to tell your friends for the next couple weeks, yeah, I'm taking one for the team. I'm going to go to Bible study. I want to look this morning at our early church history and a separation from Judaism. It's arguably today a story that's just a central text of why we're not celebrating Jews today. It isn't about Jesus. It isn't our conviction that Messiah has come that kicked us out of the synagogues. It's our utter reimagining of religion. What is religion? We said, we should let go of the purity laws. And that created quite the conflict in early Judaism. Circumcision, especially in the gym where all the men are during the week, is the visible sign that we're all good and faithful, easy. The other most obvious sign is what you're buying at Winco, because we see each other all the time in the marketplace. I gave Steve the early text about the surprise of circumcision doesn't matter anymore. Also, Paul's angriest passages are not at Gentiles, they're at we Jews who are saying, we need some quality control. We're thinking of having new members, but we're going to have them get circumcised. Paul says, why are you denying Christ? Why are you undoing everything we're about? So today I have kind of a long story, but it's the center part of today's message. It's a story we should know because it undoes the dietary laws, which is the other half. We said, wow, we love Judaism, but let's not do this thing or this thing anymore. And all the rest of the congregation said, you're kidding, what's left? What's left? What we're going to put on our bumper stickers? We might be offended that we Christians got kicked out of the synagogue in late first century, but we ought not be surprised. Here's the story. It's kind of complex. Steve will be thinking, thank God that Don didn't have me read that one. In Caesarea, there's a man, and you might know this story or it might be unfamiliar to you. That's all right. It is, again, the story that launches a new Judaism. In Caesarea, there's a man named Cornelius, a centurion of the Italian cohort, as it was called. He was a devout man. Woohoo, good. Who feared God with all his household. He gave alms generously to the people and prayed constantly to God. We like this guy. One afternoon, about 3 o'clock, he had a vision in which he clearly saw an angel of God coming in and saying to him, Cornelius. He stared at him in terror and said, what is it, Lord? The angel answered, your prayers and your alms have ascended as a memorial before God. That's great Jewish language. Tons of remembrance in the Old Testament. It's ascended as a memorial before God. Now send men to Joppa to a certain Simon who is called Peter. And our ears perk up. That's the Pope. That's our first leader, Simon Peter, right? He is lodging with Simon, a tanner, whose house is by the seaside. He has a house at Seaside. It's just a small commute from Beaverton. When the angel who spoke to him had left, he called 2 of his slaves and a devout soldier from the ranks of those who served him, and after telling them everything, he sent them to Joppa. About noon the next day, as they were on their journey and approaching the city, Peter went up to his roof to pray. he became hungry and wanted something to eat. And while it was being prepared, he fell into a trance. Reading this, I thought, I should have saved this for a Father's Day sermon, where he's hungry and he takes a nap while the food's being prepared for him. But that's a different sermon. He saw the heaven opened and something like a large sheet coming down, being lowered to the ground by its four corners. In it were all kinds of four-footed creatures and reptiles and birds of the air. And he heard a voice saying, "Get up, Peter, kill and eat." But Peter said, "By no means, Lord, for I have never eaten anything that is profane or unclean," a collection of which are in that sheet. The voice said to him again a second time, "What God has made clean, you must not call profane." This happened 3 times, and the thing was suddenly taken back up to heaven. Now, while Peter was greatly puzzled about what to make of the vision he had seen, I know I just got to stop here and say, Peter, I don't know, how are you having a hard time making trouble of this? You not only had a vision, you had someone explain the vision to you, and now you're still, I don't know what it means. Suddenly, the men sent by Cornelius, now our story comes round circle for the close, appeared. They were asking for Simon's house and were standing by the gate. They were called out to ask whether Simon, who is called Peter, was staying there. While Peter was still thinking about his vision, the Spirit said to him, "Look, 3 men are searching for you. Now get up, go down, and go with them without hesitation, for I have sent them." So Peter went down to the men and said, "I'm the one you're looking for. What's the reason for your coming?" They answered, "Well, Cornelius, a centurion, an upright and God-fearing man who is well spoken by the whole Jewish nation, was directed by a holy angel to send for you to come to his house to hear what you have to say." So Peter invited them in, gave them lodging, and the next day they got up and went with them. And some of the believers from Joppa accompanied them. We're getting quite a little group together. The following day they came back to Caesarea. Cornelius was expecting them and had called together his relatives and close friends. On Peter's arrival, Cornelius met him and, falling at his feet, worshiped him. But Peter made him get up, saying, "Stand up, I'm only a mortal." As he talked with him, he went in and found that many had assembled, and he said to them, "Look, you yourselves know it's unlawful for a Jew to associate with or visit a Gentile. But God has shown me," and now Peter gets bonus points. He's internalized and made a metaphor out of his vision. "God has shown me that I should not call anyone," not just anything, not any food, "I should not call anyone profane or unclean. So when I was sent for, I came without objection. Now may I ask why you sent for me?" Cornelius said, 4 days ago at this very hour at 3 o'clock, I was praying in my house when suddenly a man in dazzling clothes stood before me and said, "Cornelius, your prayer has been answered. Your alms have been remembered before God. Send therefore to Joppa and ask for Simon, who is called Peter. He's staying at the home of Simon, a tanner by the sea. Therefore I sent for you immediately, and you have been kind enough to come." So now all of us are here in the presence of God to listen to all that the Lord has commanded you to say. And then in your Bible, this next section is called Gentiles Hear the Good News, arguably the core of the New Testament. We've got Old Testament is Judaism, and the New Testament is how non-Jews can be Jews. Old Testament is here's the covenant. New Testament is how we can adapt that covenant to be universal. All of Paul's writing aimed right there. Then Peter began to speak to them. I truly understand that God shows no partiality, but in every nation, anyone who fears him and does what is right is acceptable. And what follows is a long recap of the gospel. Puts all the 4 gospels into perspective, what they are about God intervening and reaching out. So there it is. The end, the purpose of the law is to show how impossible it is to be holy. It's to drive us to an awareness and appreciation of grace. It's how grace then is supposed to work to bring us back to a new being. It produces fruits only then. Matter of fact, Paul has some fun. He's so enamored of this grace that he calls it a new law. Paul does this all with dense writing, saying the new law is that we rely on grace alone. He knows that he's been talking about the law is outdated, only points this way. And here's a new law. You're forgiven, sinners. You're in. Now, and then much of his writing, why, for crying out loud, don't you start living like it? Others might get to be self-righteous, but not us. Friends, I have a hard time loving my conservative neighbor. I need help feeling okay. How about even some friends and ex-friends who are in our Christian tradition, who are in churches I've served, with the too close ties many of them, especially the more evangelical types, have with Christian nationalism. And please hear me carefully in this paragraph. The sins of the right, the racism and dishonesty that seem now utterly commonplace with political conservatives in ways that they were not just a handful of years ago. The misogyny of conservative politics throughout our country, the dishonesty about science, elections, the homophobia that is costing lives, illiberal religion is damaging our world and threatens our democracy in ways that no stance on the left does. There's that paragraph. But my job today is merely to notice that I sometimes seem to have a purity code as well. Call it political correctness if you must. I hear it at times in my discourse, a rigidity that can feel ungracious. I feel it at times here at Chuck as well. A desire for purity in political thought. We're much more forgiving of theology, philosophical stuff. When it comes times for politics, I wonder if sometimes we forget a little grace. And the problem is, I'm late to the party, so I don't get to be proud about having a right ideology. I'm only invited. I'm only here before you because some goofy dream with sheets and animals and visions where God says, there's no unclean any longer. You can let anyone in. You can let Don in. What am I right about? What am I clever about? What am I most proud of? What shall I be self-righteous and brag about? One thing, according to Paul. One thing. I'm the kid added to the party last. I am utterly undeserving of God's love and attentions towards me. That. Paul says, I'm amongst the worst, best sinners. That's what I get to be proud of. Lift that up. I've got a right to fall on my knees at this table in a minute. I'm lucky to tag along. That is not something I'd lord over someone else. It is deeply good news. Friends, we are invited to an impossibly broad table this morning, maybe even broad enough to be a little annoying to us in some ways. I'm just glad that I get a seat. I'm just glad that I get a piece of birthday cake today. It's an amazing grace. It's something I'm trying in every part of my life to wrap myself around. Amen.